My boss cut my salary from $98K to $38K. Then I gave them a patent that made them regret it. The conference room felt like a courtroom the moment I walked in. 3 faces stared at me from across that polished oak table, and none of them looked friendly. Grayson Turner sat in the middle, my direct boss and VP of R&D, wearing that snake smile he always used before crushing someone. To his left was Bradley Holt from Operations, arms crossed like a bouncer. Megan Walsh from HR sat on the right, already typing notes on her tablet before I even sat down. Something was very wrong here. "Dakota, thanks for joining us," Grayson started, his voice dripping with false warmth. "We need to discuss some organizational changes." Organizational changes. Corporate speak for someone's about to get screwed. I'd been at Brightstone Dynamics for 8 years, consistently their top materials engineer. My graphene composite research was months from breakthrough. What changes could possibly involve me? Then Megan slid a document across the table. "Effective immediately, we're restructuring your compensation package," she said flatly. I grabbed the paper and my blood turned to ice. My salary, $98,000 annually, was being slashed to $38,000. $60,000 gone, just like that. "This is a mistake," I said, my voice barely steady. "There must be an error in the paperwork." Grayson leaned back in his chair, that smirk growing wider. "No error, Dakota. Market adjustments. Company needs. You understand." I didn't understand anything except that I was being robbed in broad daylight. "Market adjustments?" I repeated, my hand shaking as I held that document. "I brought in 3 patents last year alone. My graphene project is about to revolutionize your entire product line." Bradley finally spoke up, his voice cold and mechanical. "The graphene project will continue under new leadership. We're redistributing resources to maximize efficiency." That's when it hit me like a freight train. They weren't just cutting my salary. They were pushing me out the door while keeping my research. 8 years of work, my breakthrough formulations, my testing protocols. Everything I'd built was about to be stolen right from under me, stamped with someone else's name. Grayson would take credit, probably get promoted to SVP on my innovation. "This is theft," I said quietly. All 3 of them stiffened. "Careful with that word," Grayson warned, his smile vanishing. "Everything you've developed belongs to Brightstone. Check your employment contract." Megan nodded in agreement. "All intellectual property created during your employment is company property. You signed those terms in 2017. The pieces started falling into place as I sat there, stunned and speechless. This wasn't sudden at all. They'd been planning this for months, and I'd been too buried in my research to notice the trap closing around me. 3 weeks ago, my lab access badge stopped working on weekends. Security claimed it was a system glitch. Then my keycard permissions were downgraded. I could only enter during business hours now, always with cameras watching, always with someone knowing exactly when I was there. The restrictions didn't stop there. 2 months back, Grayson suddenly reassigned my graphene project to a shared team database. He called it collaboration. "We need transparency across departments," he'd said with that practiced smile. My private research files, my experimental formulas, everything I'd protected for years was suddenly accessible to people I didn't trust. I'd protested, but he pulled rank. VP orders. Non-negotiable. I should have fought harder. Then came the budget cuts that made no sense. My material requisitions started getting rejected. Rare earth elements I needed for testing? Denied. High-purity graphene samples? Out of stock indefinitely. Meanwhile, other projects got approved without question. My lab assistant was transferred to another department. My testing equipment schedules were constantly double-booked. Every roadblock had a reasonable excuse attached, but together they formed a pattern. They were strangling my project while making it look like normal corporate friction. But the final piece clicked into place last Tuesday night. I'd stayed late finishing calibration tests and the building felt empty. Around 9 p.m., I walked back toward my lab to grab my jacket. That's when I saw them through the glass panel. Grayson and Bradley, hunched over my workstation, flipping through my physical lab notebooks, the ones I kept offline deliberately. My handwritten notes, my breakthrough formulas, my 8 years of trial and error. Bradley was photographing pages with his phone, while Grayson kept watch at the door. I ducked back before they spotted me, heart hammering in my chest. They were stealing my work, not just claiming it, actually stealing the raw data before pushing me out. Smart, really. Once I was gone, they'd have everything they needed to continue the research without me. Grayson would present my graphene composite as his own innovation. Bradley would manufacture it. They'd split the patent credits, the bonuses, probably promotions to C-suite positions. And I'd be the disgruntled former employee who couldn't prove anything because I'd signed away my rights years ago. That salary cut wasn't punishment or restructuring. It was a trap, pure and simple, designed to leave me with nothing. But what Grayson and Bradley didn't know, what nobody at Brightstone knew, was that I'd seen this coming years ago. Not this exact scenario, but something like it. I'd watched too many brilliant engineers get chewed up by corporate greed, their life's work stolen and their names erased. So 3 years back, I made a decision that would either save me or ruin me. I built my own lab. My loft on the 8th floor in Portland became my sanctuary. The building was old industrial, converted into residential spaces with high ceilings and solid concrete floors, perfect for what I needed. I spent $60,000 of my own savings converting the second bedroom into a legitimate materials research lab. Ventilation system, fume hood, precision scales, temperature-controlled storage. I bought used equipment from university surplus sales and retired professors. Every dollar came from my pocket, every piece of equipment purchased under my name alone. No company money, no corporate resources, completely independent. For 3 years, I'd been running parallel research. Everything I did at Brightstone, I replicated at home with my own twist. While they thought I was working exclusively on graphene composites for them, I was actually developing something far more valuable in my private lab. Every night after work, every weekend, every vacation day, I'd test formulas, run experiments, document results in notebooks that never left my apartment. My neighbors probably thought I was crazy, working until 2 a.m. most nights, but obsession looks like madness until it pays off. And 6 months ago, it finally paid off spectacularly. I created something Brightstone would kill to own. A cold cure adhesive that maintains full bonding strength at -40 degrees Fahrenheit. Sounds simple, but it's revolutionary. Every adhesive on the market fails in extreme cold. Arctic construction, aerospace applications, Antarctic research stations, they all struggle with this exact problem. My formula solved it completely. The polymer chains I engineered don't crystallize in sub-zero temperatures. They stay flexible, stay strong, stay bonded. The applications were worth hundreds of millions, maybe billions. Military contracts alone would be massive. Arctic oil drilling, space station repairs, cold climate infrastructure. I'd run every test imaginable in my home lab. Thermal cycling, shear strength, long-term degradation analysis. The data was bulletproof. I had 3 notebooks filled with experimental results, all dated and witnessed by my neighbor who's a notary public. Patent-ready documentation that proved conception and reduction to practice, all done on my own time with my own resources. Brightstone had absolutely no claim to it. That same afternoon, I walked into Elena Rodriguez's office carrying 3 years of documentation. She was a patent attorney with a reputation for being absolutely ruthless in protecting inventors. Her office walls displayed framed patents she'd successfully defended against corporate giants. "I need to file immediately," I told her, spreading my lab notebooks across her desk. Elena's eyes lit up as she scanned my cold cure adhesive formulas. Within 24 hours, we'd filed 4 separate patent applications, all under my name alone. 2 days later, I requested another meeting with the exact same people. Grayson looked annoyed when Megan sent the calendar invite. He probably thought I was coming back to beg or negotiate my salary cut. Bradley seemed bored already, checking his phone as I walked in. Megan had that practiced HR neutrality on her face. None of them expected what I was about to do. I sat down and placed 4 folders on the conference table, one in front of each of them. "Before we discuss my employment status further, I need you to review these documents," I said calmly. Grayson opened his folder first, and I watched the color drain from his face as he read the first page. Patent application number 1. Filed with the USPTO 48 hours ago. Inventor, Dakota Pierce. Owner, Dakota Pierce. Cold cure adhesive technology for extreme temperature applications. Bradley's folder hit the table hard as realization set in. What is this? Grayson's voice had lost all its smoothness. That's my intellectual property. I replied evenly. 4 separate patent applications for technologies I developed entirely outside of Brightstone. The cold cure adhesive you're looking at works at -40 degrees. Revolutionary for Arctic construction, aerospace, military applications, worth approximately $500 million in licensing potential. I let that number sink in while Megan frantically flipped through her folder, probably looking for some clause to invoke. Bradley finally found his voice, angry and desperate. Everything you create while employed here belongs to Brightstone. Your contract explicitly states that. He jabbed his finger at the folder. We own this, Pierce. You can't just file patents behind our backs. I'd been waiting for exactly that argument. I pulled out my phone and opened a folder containing 3 years of documentation. Actually, you don't own any of it, and here's why, I said, my voice steady and cold. Every single experiment was conducted after midnight in my private lab. I have time-stamped security camera footage showing me entering my building, not yours. Every piece of equipment was purchased with my personal credit cards. I have 3 years of receipts totaling $60,000. Every chemical, every material, every tool came from my own pocket. I never used Brightstone resources, Brightstone time, or Brightstone facilities. My neighbor, a licensed notary public, witnessed and dated every page of my lab notebooks. I pulled out a thumb drive and slid it across the table. That contains video documentation of my entire lab setup, purchase receipts, bank statements showing personal expenditures, and affidavits from my notary witness. My attorney has already reviewed everything. Your employment contract covers work done on company time with company resources. This wasn't either. This is completely, legally, independently mine. The silence in that room was absolutely beautiful. Grayson's mouth opened and closed, like a fish drowning in air, searching for words that wouldn't come. Bradley had gone pale, his confident corporate swagger completely shattered. Megan looked between all of us, clearly calculating how much legal exposure Brightstone now faced. But I wasn't finished yet. Not even close. I reached into my jacket pocket and pulled out a single sheet of paper, my resignation letter, and placed it on the table with deliberate precision. Oregon is an at-will employment state, I said clearly. That means either party can terminate employment at any time without cause. So I'm exercising that right effective immediately. Consider this my formal resignation from Brightstone Dynamics. I watched Grayson's face shift from shock to panic. He'd planned to push me out after stealing my research. But now I was walking away on my terms, taking technology worth $500 million with me. The power dynamic had completely reversed in less than 10 minutes. Bradley found his voice first, desperate and grasping. You can't just leave. Your projects, the graphene research, you have obligations. He was scrambling now, trying to find any leverage. We have deadlines, contracts with clients depending on your work. I almost laughed at the irony. 2 days ago, they were ready to throw me out with a $60,000 pay cut. Now suddenly I had obligations? My obligations ended when you slashed my salary to $38,000, I replied coldly. Besides, I've already accepted another position. Peak Ridge Industries offered me a senior research director role. They're very interested in licensing my cold cure adhesive technology. Actually, they've already committed to a licensing agreement. That was the final blow, and I saw it land perfectly. Peak Ridge was Brightstone's biggest competitor in advanced materials. The thought of me walking through their doors with breakthrough technology made Grayson look physically ill. Peak Ridge? Grayson's voice came out strangled. You're taking proprietary knowledge to our direct competitor? I held up the thumb drive again, my ace in the hole. What proprietary knowledge? Everything I'm bringing to Peak Ridge was developed independently. You have zero ownership claim. My attorney made absolutely certain of that. Unless you want to argue in court that you own research conducted in my private residence, with my personal equipment, on my personal time, documented with 3 years of receipts and video evidence. The legal nightmare of that fight was written all over their faces. Megan finally spoke up, her HR training kicking in. Let's everyone take a breath here. Dakota? Perhaps we can discuss the salary adjustment. Clearly there's been a misunderstanding about your value to the organization. Classic HR playbook. Backtrack, smooth things over, pretend the attack never happened. But I'd seen behind their masks now. I knew exactly what they'd tried to do. I walked out of that conference room and never looked back. Within hours, I'd made 3 phone calls that would change everything. Catherine Wells picked up on the second ring. She was head of R&D at Peakridge Industries, and I'd met her at materials science conferences over the years. Smart, aggressive, always hunting for competitive advantages. I explained my cold cure adhesive in exactly 90 seconds. She wanted an exclusive meeting immediately. The next call went to Dean Kim at Industrial Solutions Group. Dean ran their advanced materials division and had a reputation for moving fast on breakthrough technology. He'd tried recruiting me twice before. When I mentioned -40-degree bonding strength, I heard him typing furiously in the background. "How soon can you get here?" he asked. I told him I'd need 2 days to arrange proper presentations. He agreed without hesitation. My third call was to Emery Park at Consolidated Materials. Emery was the most cautious of the 3, but also the most deep-pocketed. Her company had government contracts worth billions and was always desperate for Arctic-rated technologies. "If your data holds up under scrutiny, we'll make this worth your while," she promised. I assured her my documentation was bulletproof. She scheduled a meeting for the following week. Then I sat back and let them compete. Catherine called back within 6 hours with an offer. Exclusive worldwide rights, $5 million upfront, plus royalties capped at 3%. It sounded generous until I did the math. Capped royalties meant once production scaled up, I'd be leaving massive money on the table. I thanked her politely and said I'd consider all options carefully. Dean's offer came next morning via email. $7 million upfront for exclusive North American rights, with Europe and Asia still available for separate deals. Smarter approach, but still exclusive. He wanted to lock me down before competitors could enter the market. I could see the strategy clearly. Get exclusive control, then squeeze out every dollar while I collected fixed payments instead of true market value. Emery's team took 4 days to respond, but their offer was the most creative. $10 million upfront for exclusive global rights, plus 8% uncapped royalties, and a seat on their technical advisory board. Tempting, very tempting. But exclusive still meant putting all my eggs in one basket. If they mismanaged the technology or moved slowly, I'd be stuck watching my invention gather dust. That's when I realized I held all the power here. I called all 3 back on the same day and delivered identical messages. I appreciate your generous offers, but I've decided against exclusive licensing. Instead, I'm offering non-exclusive licenses at 20% royalties with no upfront payment required. You'll compete in the market based on your manufacturing and distribution capabilities, not on artificial monopoly. The silence on each call was profound. Catherine recovered first, sounding almost angry. 20% with no exclusivity? That's insane, Catherine said, but I could hear the calculation in her voice. She was doing the math, realizing that 20% of massive production volume still meant serious money, and she wouldn't have to risk millions up front. Dean was more direct. "You're leaving money on the table," he argued. I told him I was leaving their money on the table, not mine. Emery was the quickest to see the genius of it. "You're forcing us to compete on merit, not monopoly," she said thoughtfully. "And you're betting that competition will drive higher overall sales volume, making your 20% worth more than a capped exclusive deal." Exactly right. 3 companies pushing my technology into different markets simultaneously would generate far more revenue than one company moving slowly with exclusive rights. Within 2 weeks, all 3 signed non-exclusive licensing agreements. My attorney projected $8 to $12 million annually in royalty income once production ramped up. Then Brightstone's lawyers sent the lawsuit papers. I was in my loft lab running stability tests when the process server knocked. The legal complaint was thick, professionally formatted, and completely desperate. Brightstone Dynamics versus Dakota Pierce, claiming ownership of all 4 patent applications based on my employment contract. They alleged I'd used company resources, company time, and company intellectual property to develop the cold cure adhesive technology. The dollar amount they were seeking was staggering. Complete ownership transfer plus $50 million in damages. I called Elena immediately and read her the complaint over the phone. She started laughing before I finished the second page. Not a polite chuckle, but genuine, full-throated laughter that lasted almost 30 seconds. "They actually filed this?" she asked, still catching her breath. "Dakota, this is the weakest IP claim I've seen in 15 years of practice." It's almost sad how desperate they are. She told me to scan and email the entire document, then scheduled an emergency meeting for that afternoon. In her office, Elena spread the lawsuit across her conference table like a detective examining evidence. "Look at their arguments," she said, pointing to highlighted sections. "They claim you used company resources, but they provide zero documentation, no server logs showing you accessed their systems after hours, no inventory records of missing materials, no witness statements from coworkers seeing you work on this project. Just vague assertions that you must have used their resources because you were their employee." She flipped to another page, shaking her head. "Here's where it gets truly pathetic," she continued. "They're arguing that any knowledge you gained while working there contributed to your invention, therefore they own it. By that logic, every company would own everything any former employee ever creates afterward. The precedent would be catastrophic for innovation. No court will touch that argument." She tapped the section about company time with her pen, her expression turning almost pitying. "And this claim about you working on company time? We have 3 years of time-stamped video showing you entering your building after midnight. We have your building's key card logs. We have credit card statements showing purchases of coffee and food near your apartment at 2 a.m. while you were running experiments. They have nothing except circumstantial employment." Elena leaned back in her chair, completely confident. "They're not suing because they think they can win. They're suing because they're terrified. You walked out with $500 million in technology and they got nothing. This lawsuit is a Hail Mary, hoping you'll settle out of fear or inconvenience. But you won't, because we're going to destroy them in discovery." She pulled out a legal pad and started sketching our response strategy. "We're going to hit them with everything at once. First, a motion to dismiss based on failure to state a claim. Their complaint is so weak it shouldn't survive initial review. Second, we're filing a countersuit for malicious prosecution and interference with business relationships. They're trying to sabotage your licensing deals with baseless legal threats." I felt a surge of satisfaction watching her work. Elena spent the next 2 weeks building our response like a master craftsman. She organized every piece of evidence into an airtight narrative. Purchase receipts for equipment, arranged chronologically with corresponding bank statements. Security camera footage from my building, time-stamped and verified by my property management company. My notarized lab notebooks, each page witnessed and dated, showing 3 years of independent research. Credit card records showing late-night purchases near my apartment during experiment sessions. She even subpoenaed my own internet service provider records. The data showed massive bandwidth usage between midnight and 4 a.m. on research nights, correlating perfectly with my documented experiment schedule. I'd been downloading scientific papers, streaming educational videos, ordering supplies online, all from my home IP address, never from Brightstone's network. It was beautiful, ironclad proof that my work happened exactly where and when I claimed. Then Elena drafted the countersuit, and it was absolutely devastating. $1.2 million in damages for malicious prosecution, tortious interference with business relationships, and defamation. She documented how Brightstone's lawsuit had forced me to disclose the litigation to my licensing partners, creating uncertainty and delaying contract implementations. Catherine Wells at Peak Ridge had actually paused equipment orders pending the lawsuit outcome. Dean Kim's team had slowed their production timeline. Emory Park's legal department had demanded additional indemnification clauses. Every delay cost real money, and Elena calculated it precisely. "They thought they could bully you into submission," she said while finalizing the countersuit. "Instead, they're about to learn an expensive lesson about filing frivolous lawsuits." We filed both documents simultaneously. The motion to dismiss landed on the judge's desk with 400 pages of supporting evidence. The countersuit hit Brightstone's legal team like a freight train. The court hearing happened 6 weeks later, and it was almost anticlimactic. Judge Patricia Morrison was a no-nonsense IP specialist who'd been on the bench for 20 years. She spent exactly 12 minutes reviewing Brightstone's complaint and our motion to dismiss. I watched her flip through pages, her expression growing increasingly skeptical. Brightstone's attorney, some expensive suit named Richard Crawford, tried to argue that my employment relationship created inherent ownership rights. Judge Morrison cut him off mid-sentence. "Counselor, where is your evidence that Mr. Pierce used company resources? I see allegations but zero documentation." Crawford fumbled with his folder, pulling out my old employment contract and highlighting the IP assignment clause. The judge wasn't impressed. "That clause covers work performed using company time and resources. You've provided no proof of either. Meanwhile, Mr. Pierce has submitted extensive documentation of independent development." She dismissed Brightstone's case entirely, right there from the bench. Motion to dismiss is granted. This lawsuit lacks merit and wastes the court's time. Mr. Pierce's countersuit will proceed to discovery. Crawford's face went white. Elena squeezed my arm under the table, fighting to keep her expression professional. We'd just won completely, and now Brightstone would have to defend against our $1.2 million countersuit with their entire legal strategy exposed as baseless. Walking out of that courthouse felt like breathing fresh air for the first time in months. But the real satisfaction came 2 weeks later, when Tommy Briggs called me. Tommy had been my research assistant at Brightstone, before they transferred him to another department during their campaign to isolate me. Good kid, smart engineer, and apparently still plugged into the company gossip network. "Dakota, you need to hear what's happening over here," he said, his voice excited and slightly awed. "The place is falling apart." According to Tommy, the lawsuit dismissal had triggered a complete meltdown. Within days of the court decision, 3 senior engineers submitted their resignations. They'd watched Brightstone try to steal my work, fail miserably, and get countersued for over $1 million. If the company would do that to me, their top performer, what would they do to anyone else? The talent exodus started immediately. Tommy said the R&D department looked like a ghost town, with empty desks and abandoned projects everywhere. The failed lawsuit had destroyed any remaining trust in leadership. "Grayson's completely lost control," Tommy continued. "The graphene project he stole from you? Dead in the water. Turns out nobody else actually understood your methodology. They've been trying to replicate your results for 2 months and can't get the polymer chains to stabilize. They're burning through budget with nothing to show for it." I felt a grim satisfaction hearing that. They'd wanted my research so badly they'd tried to force me out and claim it. Now they had access to all my company files and couldn't make any of it work without me. The financial bleeding was apparently spectacular. The countersuit legal fees were mounting daily. Discovery was forcing them to produce thousands of documents, requiring expensive attorney hours to review everything. Meanwhile, their R&D pipeline had stalled completely. Projects I'd been leading were frozen because nobody could take over midstream. New business development had ground to a halt because their technical capabilities were suddenly questionable. Clients were asking uncomfortable questions about their innovation capacity. Tommy saved the best news for last. "The board held an emergency meeting yesterday," he said, lowering his voice like he was sharing classified information. "Word is they're considering firing Grayson. The lawsuit was his idea, and it's turned into a complete disaster. He promised them he could claim your patents and save the company millions. Instead, he's cost them their best engineer, triggered a talent crisis, and exposed them to a 7-figure countersuit." I could picture Grayson squirming in that boardroom, trying to explain how his brilliant plan had backfired so catastrophically. 3 days later, Tommy sent me a text with a news article link. "Brightstone Dynamics announces leadership changes," read the headline. I opened the article and felt vindication wash over me. Grayson Turner had been terminated as VP of R&D, effective immediately. The board cited strategic differences and failed project management. Bradley Holt had been demoted from VP Operations to a regional manager position. The company was trying to distance itself from the disaster they'd created, but it was already too late. The damage was irreversible, and the market knew it. Brightstone's stock price started dropping the day after Grayson's termination became public. Investors weren't stupid. They could read between the lines. The company had lost its top materials engineer, filed a frivolous lawsuit that got dismissed, faced a massive countersuit, and just fired 2 senior executives. Red flags everywhere. Within 2 weeks, the stock had fallen 40%. Analysts were downgrading their ratings and questioning the company's innovation pipeline. Then the quarterly earnings report came out and it was catastrophic. Revenue down 23% year-over-year. R&D productivity at an all-time low. Major client contracts were being lost to competitors. The report specifically mentioned talent retention issues and increased legal expenses. They didn't name me directly, but everyone in the industry knew exactly what had happened. One engineer's departure had triggered a corporate death spiral. The debt situation made everything worse. Brightstone had been carrying significant loans for equipment purchases and facility expansion. Those loans came with covenants requiring certain financial metrics. With revenue plummeting and legal costs mounting, they were violating their debt agreements. Banks started demanding immediate repayment or loan restructuring with punishing interest rates. The company was bleeding cash from every direction at once. Meanwhile, my licensing partners were destroying them in the marketplace. Peak Ridge Industries launched their first cold cure adhesive product line 6 months after signing our agreement. Catherine Wells had moved fast, getting manufacturing online and sales teams trained. Their Arctic construction division won 3 major contracts that Brightstone had been competing for. Dean Kim's Industrial Solutions Group followed 2 months later with their own product launch, targeting aerospace applications. Emery Park's Consolidated Materials secured a massive military contract for cold weather equipment repairs. All 3 companies were paying me 20% royalties on every sale. Brightstone couldn't compete. They had nothing comparable in their product pipeline. The graphene research they'd tried to steal from me remained stuck in development hell. Their engineers couldn't replicate my results and they'd lost the institutional knowledge when I left. Every quarter, they fell further behind while their competitors thrived on technology I'd developed independently. 12 months after I walked out, Brightstone filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy protection. The announcement hit the financial news on a Tuesday morning. Assets of $92 million, liabilities of $137 million. They were underwater by $45 million with no path to profitability. The bankruptcy filing listed my countersuit as one of their significant outstanding liabilities. My attorney had settled that suit 6 months earlier for $600,000, but the damage to their reputation and finances had been permanent. I watched the bankruptcy proceedings with clinical interest. The bankruptcy auction happened 3 months later and I attended anonymously through a shell company Elena helped me establish. I bought Brightstone's entire lab equipment inventory for 20 cents on the dollar. The same equipment they'd refused to let me use was now mine, legally purchased from their liquidation, poetic justice at its finest. With the royalties flowing in and my reputation restored, I founded Pierce Materials Engineering. Tommy Briggs became my first hire as VP of Research Operations. Dr. Miranda Stevens, a brilliant polymer chemist, joined as senior scientist. I brought in 4 lab technicians and later added Alana Liu as head of IP protection. Within 2 years, we grew from 8 employees to 120, with 3 patents pending and contracts worth $40 million annually. Our first 3 major contracts came within 6 months of launch. A Peak Ridge wanted next-generation cold cure formulations for extreme Arctic applications. Industrial Solutions needed advanced corrosion-resistant coatings for offshore platforms. A defense contractor approached us for impact-resistant sealants for military vehicles. Revenue hit $8 million the first year, then $50 million by year 3. Then Alana Liu walked into my office with a story painfully familiar. Her former employer had stolen her self-healing concrete patent and was marketing it as their own innovation. I connected her with Elena Rodriguez, and together we fought her case to victory. Inspired by her experience, I launched an IP protection division, specifically to help independent engineers defend their innovations against corporate theft. 5 years after everything fell apart, my phone rang with a Seattle number I didn't recognize. I answered out of curiosity, and Grayson Turner's voice came through, older and tired. He was selling packaging boxes now, he said quietly. He'd called to apologize for what happened at Brightstone. The lawsuit, The salary cut. Trying to steal my research. He sounded genuinely remorseful. I listened without interrupting, then spoke calmly. Your mistake wasn't cutting my salary, Grayson. Your mistake was believing you owned the work of people smarter than you. I let that sink in for a moment, then ended the call. No anger, no gloating, just truth. I looked out my office window at Pierce Materials Engineering, 120 employees working on innovations that would change industries. I hadn't destroyed Brightstone. I'd simply walked away and built something better. The best revenge, I realized, is living well.